The typical lesson for writing and rhetoric, we start off with an introduction to whatever skill may be learned, whatever new form of writing may be attempted in that lesson. And then we move from there to an inviting story. Usually it's, we call it the chapter story. It's something that will grab their attention. That's an example of excellent writing, so that when they go to imitate down the road or to lift quotes from that piece of writing, they already have something beautiful under their belt. And then immediately following the chapter story, we go to narration. And narration is important because when you tell a story back, it goes into your long-term memory, and it really becomes, you're expressing that story in your own words, so it actually becomes a part of you. It's almost like saying, in a sense, that this is becoming part of your DNA. That story is going to stick with you for the rest of your life. Stories have a way of doing that, and especially if you're narrating. So then, they've read this beautiful story, they've narrated it back, and there's all sorts of different ways you can narrate. You can narrate it with students in partnership. You can have a student narrate to the whole classroom. Sometimes you can have students do a drama and narrate by acting out the story. There's all sorts of different ways to narrate. And then from there we go to the talk about it section. The talk about it section is simply a way for students to analyze the ideas, the big ideas that came out of the chapter story. So that here you were looking at the story really in terms of just remembering the details in narration, and now you're looking at it from a different angle. You're looking to analyze it and to say, really, what is meaningful about the story we just read? Why does it matter? And that's what the talk about it section is all about. And we also have we quite often have images that would go along with the story, because I think it's vital that young people in today's world, today's world uses imagery all the time, and students are subjected to image in television and in the movies and in advertising, and I think it's important that young people are able to analyze image too, just the way they would analyze the rhetoric of a story or the rhetoric of an essay. They also need to be able to look at an image and say, what's being said here? What's the content of the image? So we have a lot of that too in the talk about it section. And then we get into sentence play, which is a chance for students to see how flexible the English language is. You can write a sentence many, many different ways, and so sentence play is just that. It's a way to say, okay, here's a sentence, go ahead and manipulate it, see how flexible it is. It's something you can play with, like Play-Doh. It's plastic, you can mold it and shape it. And so it's very important for young writers to know that there's not just one way to express something. There are many ways to say the same thing. And that gets us into our copiousness section, where we do take many ways to say the same thing. Again, to show just how flexible English is, and also how you can bring subtlety and nuance in the way you express yourself. It doesn't always have to be just one way. As we go through the series, the copiousness section zeroes in on rhetorical devices, which are dynamic ways to express yourself, ways that are attention-grabbing and fascinating. I love rhetorical devices because it gives students a whole arsenal of ways to express themselves in captivating ways. And the ancient world has given us a ton of them. So after we do sentence play and copiousness, this is all part of a section called writing time. So this is where students have finished narrating, finished talking about it, and are actually putting pen to paper. So sentence play, manipulating sentences, and playing with grammar sometimes. Copiousness, learning to write copiously, abundantly, seeing all the different ways that you can express the same thought. And then finally, we come to the writing essay portion of the lesson, which would be you're either putting together an essay, or you're writing a story, or it's the sort of the most obvious part of writing a rhetoric. You're sitting down and you have an outline to work with, and you're following that outline from introduction to conclusion. And then after that, we have a speak it section. And the speak it section is important for a number of reasons. Because when you're developing writing, again, you want to make sure that you're also developing the spoken word as well, that you become increasingly confident expressing yourself orally. And the reason for that is that we want our writers, as they did in the ancient world, to be able to enter into public discourse, whether that discourse is in a classroom where you're analyzing a poem or a novel, where you can speak up and share your thoughts in a variety of different settings. And also the speak it section is great because it puts a little space between the essay writing and the revision part of the lesson. And the reason that's important is because oftentimes, I'm sure you've had this experience, you will go back to something you've written 24, 48 hours later, and you go, what was I thinking? This is terrible. But it's a start because it's a rough draft. And so it's great to put a little distance between the end of your essay and the process of revision. And so when we get to revise it, which is the last section of the typical lesson, the students will be encouraged to read their essay out loud, their essay or their story. And by reading out loud, it's much easier to catch the problems that may exist in the writing, or just if there's been some clunky prose and you want to sharpen it a little, make it sound more beautiful. Maybe perfectly serviceable, but it doesn't quite sound lovely yet. And so the revise it part is a way to get at checking proofreading, checking for grammar mistakes, and also to really make sure that your essay is accomplishing the purpose that you set out to arrive at in the first place.